morning, Your Honor.
My name is Danielle Jacoby, and I'm joined here today by my co-counsel, Ms. Fiona Liu.
Good morning, Your Honor.
And collectively, we represent the United States government.
Great. Your defense.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Charlie Stock, and I'm joined as co-counsel today with my co-counsel, Ms. Theodora Shabanu.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Together, we represent the defendant, Mr. Blake Crosby.
Good morning, Your Honor. Morning. Any pre-trial from the government?
Yes, Your Honor, we just have one matter to attend to. Now, prior to trial, both parties have stipulated the two exhibits in this case. That's a bullet and a cigarette. All objections are waived. So we just ask that with the court's permission, we can use those exhibits in our opening statement.
No, Your Honor, that's our understanding. They're stipulated to be pre-admissible.
Sounds good, no problem with
Yes, Your Honor, now we're ready to go.
that. Okay, anything from the defense?
Exhibit 18, the affidavit of Greg Judd, is also pre-admissible. We move to enter that as well.
Okay, any issue with it being entered now?
Without objection.
Okay,
So we're ready to go, Your Honor.
all right, you're okay from the government.
Yes, Your Honor. The defendant was hidden. The victim was in plain sight. It's July 4th of 2020, and thousands of people stand in the city center right here in Philadelphia. It's a political rally. A candidate is about to start speaking, and this crowd is chaos. The candidate walks onto the stage, and the noise is deafening. People to his right are cheering. People to his left are booing. Guards are yelling, horns are blaring, the candidate starts speaking, and then all of a sudden, there's silence. The candidate collapses onto that stage, bleeding. Everyone in the crowd stands there shocked, in horror, but a building went. Standing on a rooftop, holding a rifle. The defendant nods his head and packs away his gun. Because this defendant just shot and killed a political candidate. Because the defendant was hidden, but the victim was in plain sight. That's why we brought this defendant, Blake Crosby, to court today. And we brought a charge of first-degree murder against him. Now, what that charge means is that we, the government, have to prove that Blake Crosby intentionally killed that candidate, Tom Capello. Now, as the government, we have the burden to prove that to you beyond a reasonable doubt. And we agree, members of the jury, that is a high burden. But it's a burden that we take seriously, and it's a burden that we intend to meet. So to meet that burden today, we're going to focus on three key facts throughout the course of this trial: the reasons, the resume, and the rooftop. So starting with that first fact, the reasons. Now, members of the jury, regardless of your political stance, I'm sure that we can agree there's candidates that you disagree with, that you don't like. But you're going to learn that this defendant, well, he didn't just disagree with Tom Capello. He didn't just dislike Tom Capello. No, you'll learn that he actively despised him. You'll learn that he followed Tom Capello around the country. He went from rally to rally. He stood in the crowd and he screamed how much he hated Tom Capello. But we won't just show you why the defendant did this. No, members of the jury will show you exactly how. And that brings us to the second fact, the resume. Because today we're going to call a Secret Service agent to the stand. She'll explain to you that a crime like this requires training, that not anyone could commit this crime. This defendant, he could. Because you'll learn that this defendant spent 8 years as a sniper in the military. You'll learn that this defendant was trained how to kill. So finally, members of the jury will land on that third fact. That's the rooftop. Because you'll learn that the defendant was seen walking up to the crime scene where the rooftop shooting occurred. And not only was the defendant seen, members of the jury, no, you'll learn that we found evidence he was there. Because in this trial, you'll hear that there were two objects found on that rooftop. A bullet and a cigarette. The bullet, you'll hear that was the same type of bullet used to kill Tom Capella. The cigarette, you'll see it was covered in the defendant's DNA. So members of the jury, if you pay attention to those three facts throughout this trial, the reasons, the resume, and the rooftop, you'll see that the defendant was hidden, but the victim was in plain sight. So at the very end of this trial, I'm going to ask that you hold the defendant accountable. I'm going to ask that you don't let him stay hidden. I'm going to ask you to find the defendant guilty. Thank you.
May it please court. Counsel. Members of the jury. He's a veteran, not a vigilante. Members of the jury, this is Blake Crosby. This is the man the prosecution just called an assassin. You're going to learn today that title could not be further from the truth. He's a war hero, a veteran. He served our country, toured in Afghanistan, saved lives for 8 years. You'll learn he fought to protect our flag and everything it stands for. This is the man the prosecution is accusing of attacking the country that he was willing to risk his life. They're accusing this man of undermining the democracy that he sought to protect. He's a veteran, members of the jury, not a vigilante. You see, members of the jury, the government, they can't just walk through these courtroom doors and say that a war hero broke bad and murdered an innocent person in cold blood. That's a bold claim. So they're going to have to prove it to you. They're going to have to show you facts and evidence to prove their case beyond all reasonable doubt. That is the highest burden that we have in our legal system. They have to prove to you so thoroughly, so completely, that you have no reasonable doubts in your mind whatsoever that Blake Crosby committed this crime. They're not going to be able to do that. You're going to learn there's unanswered questions in this case. And we as the defense are going to focus on 3. Where was Blake Crosby? Who actually fired the shot? What evidence does the prosecution really have? So first, where was Blake Crosby? Because Mr. Crosby, he's going to take this stand voluntarily. Members of the jury, he's going to look you in your eyes. And he'll tell you that at the time of the shooting, he was not on a rooftop, hidden, as the prosecution would have you believe. Rather, he was at that political rally, protesting peacefully, just as he'd done on multiple occasions before, with the crowd, with all the other protesters and supporters. And you're not just going to have to take his word for it, members of the jury, because if he's there in the crowd, people would have seen him, right? You're going to learn someone did. You're going to hear about an eyewitness who saw Mr. Crosby in that crowd, recognized Mr. Crosby. You're going to hear about an eyewitness that confirms Mr. Crosby's alibi. So second, who actually fired the shot? You're going to learn today that the senator who died, he was a controversial figure. Controversial on healthcare, military, and gun control. You're going to learn this man received death threats. Countless individuals saying they wanted this man to die. You'll learn there were angry protesters in the area that day, hundreds of them. People that the prosecution labeled as suspects, but did not investigate. Hundreds of potential shooters that the prosecution just ignored. So finally, members of the jury, what evidence does the prosecution really have? You're going to be shocked at what's missing from the government's case. Members of the jury, you're going to learn today, the prosecution, they held up this cigarette in opening statement. You're going to learn this is their smoking gun. This is their murder weapon. Because members of the jury, the actual murder weapon, they're not going to be able to show you today. This is a murder trial without a murder weapon. This is a murder trial. And the prosecution is not going to be able to show you any phone records, any text messages indicating the planning of a crime, any video footage of a crime, no photographs indicating a crime ever happened, or at least tying Blake Crosby back to it, no bank records indicating a crime ever happened, nothing to show he purchased a sniper rifle. You're going to learn all of that, members of the jury, is missing. You're going to learn that this is a murder trial of a leading presidential candidate. And the prosecution is only going to call to this stand one witness. That's it. They're going to ask you to find a man guilty of the biggest political assassination in the last 60 years. And we anticipate their case in chief is going to be less than 30 minutes. Members of the jury, we acknowledge that on July 4th, 2022, our nation was attacked. Our democracy was rocked to its core. But one injustice does not have to lead to another. Just because we want answers does not mean we should start making assumptions. He's a veteran, but he's not a vigilante. That's why I'm going to come before you again at the end of this trial, and I'm going to ask you to return the only verdict consistent with the facts in this case. Not guilty. Thank you.
All right. With the government, the following witnesses or find the evidence which one.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the government calls Agent DeVito to stand.
Great.
Good morning. Can you introduce yourself to the jury?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Special Agent Morgan DeVito.
What do you do for a living, Agent DeVito?
I am the Special Agent in charge for the United States Secret Service.
And how long have you been working for the Secret Service?
Ma'am, I've been with the Secret Service for 21 years, but I have been in my current position for 8 years.
Could you summarize those 21 years of experience to members of the jury?
Yes, ma'am. Before starting with the Secret Service, I got my degree in criminal justice from the University of Chicago. Immediately after college, I applied for and was accepted to the Secret Service training program. After completing that training, I've been with the Secret Service ever since.
And Agent DeVito, I want to shift and discuss this case. Were you ever in charge of protecting a man named Tom Capello?
Yes, ma'am, I was. I was at the event on July 4th, 2022, when Senator Capello was shot and killed.
Agent DeVito, did you investigate how Tom Capello could have been killed?
I did. I was the head of the Secret Service for the investigation. We partnered with the FBI as well.
So Agent DeVito, were you here in trial during the defense's opening statement?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Ma'am, did you hear the defense say there were hundreds of suspects that you didn't investigate?
I did hear that, ma'am.
Agent DeVito, is that true?
No, ma'am. We investigated all possible suspects, but at the end of our investigation, we only had one person of interest.
You mentioned that you only had one person of interest. Who was that?
Blake Crosby, ma'am.
And why did you determine that the defendant was the person of interest?
At the end of our investigation, we found that the defendant had reasons to kill the senator, had the resume for it, and we found evidence on the roof as well.
Now, Agent DeVito, we'll get into those three facts in a moment. But first, I just want to tell the jury the general facts about the crime. Now, were you able to determine when Tom Capello was shot?
Yes, ma'am. I was actually in the crowd at the time that the senator was shot. It was July 4th at about 1:47 p.m.
And could you determine where the shot actually came from?
Well, the shot was faint, And after we scanned the area and searched all potential buildings, we found that the most likely source of the shot was the Sonesta Hotel rooftop.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation. May I be heard?
Sure.
The witness just testified that the gunshot was faint and that they searched nearby areas, so it must have come from the Sonesta Hotel. Currently, there is a foundation on the record for the witness to say that the shot actually came from the Sonesta Hotel. She can certainly give a range. We believe this information comes from a forensic report in which they give a range, a number of buildings it could have come from. But to testify that it certainly came from the Sonesta Hotel, lack of foundation.
Response. Yes, Your Honor, the foundation that opposing counsel is asking for is exactly what this witness is testifying to. I'm asking this witness how she went about conducting this investigation and searching for the location of that bullet. What she's explaining right now is how she did just that. Your Honor, if I may proper, I believe the agent will further explain, as she's already done, how she searched the entire surrounding area, searched for locations that had access to the place Tom Capello was shot, and further explain why this specific location was the one where the shot came from.
Response, Your Honor?
Shall we go more shot?
Your Honor, the witness can certainly say all of the buildings that fit the bill indicated in that forensic report, buildings where the shot could have come from. But to testify definitively, the shot came from this building, that requires foundation. It requires her to say the things that led her to come to that conclusion. And currently that foundation is not on the record, Your Honor. So until it is, this should not come onto the record.
Okay, I heard her testify that it most likely came from it, so I'm gonna give counsel some leeway to lay the foundation she said exists. If that doesn't come out, bring your objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now, Agent DeVico, you mentioned that there were 3 key facts that led you to the defendant. I want to walk through those facts one at a time. Now, first, which you recognize that the defendant posted a map of Tom Capello?
Yes, ma'am, I would.
Agent, if you could turn to exhibit 12 in the binder right there and just let me know what you think. Agent DeVico, what is this?
This is one of the tweets that we have found was made by the defendant. The date was April 5th of 2022.
Does it look like a fair and accurate copy of that tweet?
Yes, ma'am.
At this point, Your Honor, the government moves to enter exhibit 12 as evidence.
Okay, any objection?
No objections, Your Honor. It was posted by Mr. Crosby.
So good.
Agent DeVico, could you just read the defendant's tweet to the members of the jury?
I can. The defendant tweets, Thomas R. Capello is a threat to every person in this country. As long as he is alive, none of us are safe. This is the time for the patriots.
Agent DeVico, let's move to that second fact you mentioned, the resident. Did you find that this defendant had experience using a rifle before?
Yes, ma'am. I was actually present for the questioning of the defendant. And the defendant had told us that he had served in the military for 8 years as a sniper.
So as a sniper in the military for 8 years, did you find that the defendant was trained how to use a rifle?
He told us himself that he was.
And as a sniper in the military for 8 years, did you find that the defendant had experience shooting long distances?
Once again, ma'am, he told us himself he could shoot from 900, even 1,500 yards.
Agent DeVico, let's move to that third fact you mentioned, the rooftop. Now, what evidence did you find to suggest that the Sonesta rooftop was the scene of this crime?
Ma'am, we found a bullet on that rooftop and a cigarette as well. Both of those were on the south wall of the rooftop, from where you could see the stage where the senator was standing.
You mentioned some forensic evidence, we'll get to that in a moment, but did anyone see the defendant walking up to that rooftop?
Yes, ma'am. We had retrieved an interview, an affidavit from one of the employees at the hotel. They had said that they'd seen someone walking up the rooftop on July 4th, moments before the senator was shot. When
Objection, Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 403. May I be heard?
Sure.
Your Honor, this is substantially more misleading than it is probative. The witness just testified that this eyewitness saw someone walking up to the rooftop moments before the shooting. Your Honor, we have it on a good faith basis that this eyewitness did not see that person walking up to the rooftop moments before, but rather an hour before the shooting. To testify that it was moments before substantially misleads the jury to believe that it happened closer to the time of the actual shooting. That's substantially more misleading than it is probative.
Response. Yes, Your Honor, for testimony to be excluded under Rule 403, it has to be substantially more misleading than it is quoted. Your Honor, I believe the witness will go on to testify that this person was seen 45 minutes before the shooting. If opposing counsel disagrees with the characterization of this timing, that's an issue of weight, not one of admissibility. It's certainly probative for the agent to testify that this person was seen walking up moments before the crime. They can explore on cross how long those moments were before.
I agree.
Agent Tavico, could you just tell the jury what that eyewitness saw?
Yes, ma'am. The eyewitness said that they had seen someone walking up the stairwell on July 4th. But when we showed them a 16-person lineup, they identified the defendant as the person they saw walking up that stairwell.
And how certain was that eyewitness that the person they saw was the defendant?
100%.
Agent Tavico, let's move to that forensic evidence. What were the two pieces of forensic evidence you found on the rooftop?
Ma'am, there was a bullet and a cigarette.
Agent Tavico, I want to give the jury a clearer picture of where you found that evidence. Your Honor, permission for the witness to step down to better show her investigation here? Sure. Agent Tavico, you can go ahead and take that cigarette with you.
Yes, ma'am.
So, Agent, if you'll humor me for a moment, let's imagine that this wall right here, after overlooking where the shooting, could you place those two objects approximately where you found them?
Yes, ma'am. We found the bullet about right there. If we were to approximate how far the cigarette was, we could say it was about here, about 4 feet.
Agent, I want to talk about these two objects one at a time. What is this bullet here?
This is what we consider a 7.62 NATO bullet. It's something the defendant identified himself as a bullet commonly used with sniper rifles.
And was this bullet the type of bullet that killed Tom Capello?
It was. Our forensics lab had found that the bullet found in Senator Capello's head was the same type of bullet found on that rooftop.
Moving to the second piece of evidence, was this cigarette you found, was it used?
Yes, ma'am, it was used, and so we sent it to the forensics lab to figure out if we could find anything on it.
You said you sent it to the forensics lab to see if you could find anything. Did you?
Yes, ma'am. Our forensics lab had found a fingerprint that was a 16-point match to the defendant. They also found saliva that was a 1 in 6.2 billion match to the defendant.
So, Agent Tavico, how far was the defendant's DNA from the type of bullet that killed Tom Capello?
4 feet, ma'am.
Was there anything else found within 4 feet of that bullet?
No, ma'am, nothing.
Thank you, Agent Tavico. You can return to your seat. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Great. Yeah, you can pick up the evidence. Cross, when you're ready.
Agent Tavico, I'm looking for a number. How many homicides have you investigated over the course of your career?
Sir, this is my first homicide investigation.
And you are testifying on behalf of the United States government in a case involving the assassination of a political candidate, and this is the first homicide you've ever investigated of any kind?
That's right, sir. I led the Secret Service detail for this investigation.
And it's the first time you've done something.
That's right, sir.
Let's talk about what you said on direct examination, because you told us just now that this eyewitness saw someone trying to go up to that rooftop moments before the shooting. That's what you testified?
That's right, sir. 45 minutes.
You're aware that eyewitness reports it happened at 12:45, right?
Yes, sir.
An hour before the shooting, not 45.
Yes, sir. And
That's not moments, is it?
we could get caught up in semantics, sir. I do believe that at moments given the relative time in which the shooting occurred, but it wasn't out. You were correct.
Just to be clear, it's an hour between when that eyewitness saw it and when the shooting actually happened.
That's right, sir.
That eyewitness cannot place Mr. Crosby up on that rooftop at 1:45, can they?
Not at 1:45, sir.
Let's talk about the evidence you mentioned on your direct examination. Because you talked about this cigarette, didn't you?
I did, sir.
This is the only piece of forensic evidence you have in this case.
Yes, that was the only piece of evidence we found the defendant's fingerprints and saliva on.
This is not a murder weapon, is it?
No, sir, it is not.
You do not know when this cigarette was smoked, do you?
No, sir, I can't give you a time. I can only tell you whose DNA is on the cigarette.
You do not know when that DNA went onto the cigarette, do you?
I couldn't tell you, sir.
You cannot say whether this cigarette was smoked on July 4th or the day before.
No, sir, I couldn't.
All this can tell you is that at some point in time, Mr. Crosby smoked a cigarette.
That's right, sir.
It does not tell you that Mr. Crosby fired a sniper rifle at the senator.
Not that piece of evidence alone, sir.
Ma'am, you're aware that Mr. Crosby says they smoked this cigarette, but it happened on the 3rd.
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Once.
Your Honor, this is going to her investigation. She can rely on what's otherwise inadmissible under her 703.
Response, Your Honor?
Mhm.
Yes, Your Honor, at this point, I believe this hasn't been tendered as an expert witness. What they're doing right now is taking the defendant's testimony and putting that on the record. Of course, Your Honor, we can do not the defendant's or party opponent. That party opponent rule does not go both ways. This is an admissible hearsay.
Yeah, are you using this for the truth?
Yes, Your Honor, we anticipate it's actually going to come out later in trial. We can conditionally insist now.
Okay, yeah, we'll receive it on that basis, assuming it comes out later.
No, sir.
Ma'am, you're aware Mr. Crosby says that he smoked this cigarette on the 3rd and never went up on that rooftop on the 4th.
That is eventually what he said, sir. I do think we should know that initially he mentioned that he was never on the rooftop in the first place.
Ma'am, that's not what I asked. I asked about what he said, and he said that he smoked it on the 3rd. True.
That's right, sir. Eventually he did admit to being on the rooftop and smoking that cigarette.
Let's talk about the only other piece of evidence you mentioned on direct examination, because that would be this bullet, right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Ma'am, you tested this bullet, didn't you?
Our forensics lab did, sir.
Tested it for gunshot residue.
That's right.
No gunshot residue on this bullet.
No, sir, not on that bullet. That bullet is unused.
You tested it for fingerprints.
We did.
No fingerprints. Now I'm back to Mr. Crosby.
Sir, we didn't find any fingerprints on that bullet.
Tested it for DNA,
Yes, sir.
hair follicles,
Yes.
skin cells,
Yes, sir.
nothing. Time back to Mr. Crosby.
No, sir, we didn't find forensic evidence on that bullet.
You have no forensic evidence of any kind on this bullet. Time back to my client.
That's right, sir.
Let's talk about if other people could have committed this crime, because you'd agree with me, ma'am, the senator was a controversial figure, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Controversial stances
We did find that from our investigation that he was considered a controversial political candidate.
on healthcare,
Yes, sir.
on military issues,
Yes, sir.
and on gun control.
That's right.
The senator received death threats. Isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
People sending messages saying they wanted the senator dead.
Yes, we did find that through our search of social media.
You're aware there were hundreds of protesters there in the area that day.
That's right, sir.
People you admit you labeled as suspects.
Initially, sir.
You cannot tell us whether any of those other protesters had military history, can you?
No, sir.
You cannot tell us whether any of those other people had the ability to make that shot, can you?
No, sir.
You don't even know how many of them were armed, do you?
No, we don't.
Let's talk about the evidence that's missing from your investigation. Because you don't have the murder weapon, do you?
No, sir. We only found a trigger guard at a Philadelphia cheesesteak house, but that was all that we found from the murder.
You're talking about a trigger guard. Man, you don't know that came from the murder weapon, do you?
We know that it was a trigger guard from a sniper rifle, but we didn't find any forensic evidence on it, sir. That's right.
So that's a no. You can't say it came from the murder weapon.
Just the potential murder.
You tested it, no gunshot residue,
That's correct.
no fingerprints tying back to Mr. Crosby,
That's right.
no DNA tying back to Mr. Crosby.
That's right.
Let's talk about what else is missing from your investigation, because you don't have phone records, do you?
No, sir, we don't.
No texts from Mr. Crosby indicating a crime was being planned?
No, sir, the only words from the defendant we have is that tweet.
No calls of any kind?
No, sir,
No video footage of any crimes being committed?
we didn't find any video footage, sir.
No surveillance camera footage?
No, sir, the Sonesta's rooftop, the surveillance camera was not working, and there was not a camera on the stairwell leading to the rooftop.
So no photographs of any crimes being committed?
No,
No receipts that Mr. Crosby ever purchased a sniper rifle?
no, we didn't find that.
No receipts indicating you ever purchased any ammo?
No, sir,
Mr. Crosby, he'd been out of the military for 6 years, isn't that right?
that's correct.
In fact, the records you reviewed showed you that man doesn't even own a sniper rifle. Isn't that right?
According to the records, we didn't find any sniper rifles registered under his name. That's correct.
So you have no evidence that he ever had a sniper rifle after he left the military?
That's right, sir.
Nothing further.
Give me your time.
Yeah, Your Honor. If I could just ask how much time I have?
1 minute and 10 seconds.
Agent DeVico, opposing counsel just asked you a bit about how you conducted your investigation. Now, is it true that this is the first homicide you investigated?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Agent DeVico, is this the first investigation that you've conducted for a crime like this?
Certainly not, ma'am. Part of my investigations have to do with the attempted threats against political candidates or people that we protect in general.
And Agent DeVico, in this case, did you work alone?
No, ma'am. I worked with the FBI and all of my agents here at the Secret Service.
And Agent, opposing counsel just asked you a bit about what you did and didn't find in this investigation. Did you find anyone else's DNA anywhere near the crimes?
No, ma'am. The only DNA we found on that rooftop was the defendant's.
Did you find any other reports of another suspect near the crimes?
No, ma'am.
Did you find any other reports of another suspect who had the experience to commit this crime?
We did not.
Thank you, Agent DeVico. Nothing further, Your Honor.
No recross examination, Your Honor.
Makes an excuse. Any further evidence from the government?
No, Your Honor, this time the government has.
Great. We're gonna move to the defense. If you want to name it, speak the weapon.
The defense calls Mr. Blake Crosby. Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Morning, everyone. My name is Blake Crosby.
What do you do for a living, Mr. Crosby?
Right now, I'm an Uber driver. Just work at the post office. I spend some more time with my dogs.
Have you always been an Uber driver?
No, sir, I actually used to be in the military.
Can you tell us what branch of the military you were in?
That's Army, sir.
How long did you serve?
I recruited right out of high school. The military for about 8 years.
Were you deployed?
Yes, sir. Afghanistan.
What kind of work did you do in Afghanistan?
My job was to protect the people on the front lines. Make sure I had the backs of the people that were behind me.
Mr. Crosby, I want to take some time to respond to the accusations that have been made against you today. Could you start by telling the members of the jury where you were on July 4th, 2022?
Right here in the city, Philadelphia.
What brought you to Philadelphia?
I was protesting the new presidential candidate, Thomas Capella.
Why were you protesting Senator Capella?
He wanted to abolish the military, wanted to take away what protected this country, and I disagreed with that. I wanted to express that opinion.
So you said that you wanted to protest Senator Capella. Does that mean you wanted to kill Senator Capella?
No, quite the opposite. I wanted to draw attention to how problematic that was. I mean, for 8 years, I protected this democracy. I could have never done something like this.
Sir, how long were you there at the rally that day?
The entire day. Started at 10.
Do you know if anyone saw you there?
People had to, there were thousands of people at that rally.
I'm approaching the witness with exhibit 18, showing opposing counsel. Your Honor, this is pre-admitted. Could you refresh just the top line of that exhibit?
Affidavit of grade judge.
Read for us lines 38 through 39.
But I'm 100% sure I saw Crosby at the Capello rally on July 4th, 2022.
Read an exhibit from the witness. So you just read a line from the affidavit of a witness who says they saw you there at that rally. How sure are you that you were there at that rally when Thomas Capello was shot?
I'm positive, sir. I was there the entire time. I was wearing the same shirts as the protesters. I was cheering the same chants. I was there.
Were you there when the senator got shot?
I was, Mr. Stark, I was.
Could you describe to the members of the jury what you saw?
Senator Capello walked onto the stage at about 1:45. Got behind the podium and I looked away for a second and I heard a shot and his body just hit the floor.
How did you react when you saw something like that?
Now, in the military, you're trained to handle these things. You're trained to see this kind of violence, but 6 years out of it, and to see it in this country to a civilian, I didn't handle it well, sir.
Let's talk about why the government might be saying you were elsewhere at the time of the shooting. I'm approaching the witness with what's already been entered into evidence as to the 7th cigarette. You recognize that?
Yes, sir, I do.
Can you tell us what it is?
This is my cigarette.
When did you smoke that cigarette?
July 3rd, 2022.
Where did you smoke that cigarette?
Listen, I know it's a nasty habit, but I was on the 24th floor or 25th floor of the hotel. I didn't want to go all the way down out to the street, so I smoked it on the roof.
Have you been here all throughout trial, sir?
Listen to every single word that Jacoby, special agent, has said.
Has the government ever approached you with evidence to prove that you smoked that cigarette on the 4th, not the 3rd?
Not once.
So let's talk about what you told the FBI about that cigarette when you first spoke about it.
Yes, sir.
Because you told us you smoked it on the 3rd. Is that what you told the FBI when you first spoke to them?
Not proud of it. Not at first.
What did you say?
I told them that I had never been on that roof.
Why wouldn't you say that you just smoked it on the 3rd?
I was scared. I was in an FBI interrogation room being accused of murdering the leading presidential candidate. I didn't want them to assume that just because I had been on that roof, I had done something wrong. That sounds right.
Let's talk about whether you would have been capable of committing this crime. Could you tell us what your role was in the military?
I was a sniper.
Does it take practice to be a good sniper?
It's a thing with these sir, it takes a lot of training, a lot of dedication.
Do you have to shoot consistently?
Yes, sir. The Army requires that you have to shoot consistently your entire career in a time. Right.
How long had it been since you've been in the military?
I left in 2017, so about 6 years.
Sitting here today, do you think you could hit a shot 604 yards away from your target?
Probably not, sir. I haven't picked up a rifle since I left the military.
You said that you haven't picked up a rifle since you left the military. Let's talk about whether you even would have been able to access.
Okay.
How did you go about traveling to Philadelphia?
So I live in LA. I flew, thank you to that, drove from LA to Boston, and then I rented a car and drove from Boston.
When you took that flight, did you have to go through security?
It's sort of a lot of it, and anyone who's been to LA, I've seen pretty long.
Did you bring a sniper rifle with you through security?
That was a good thing. I think that's something they would have noticed.
When you arrived in Boston, did you buy a sniper rifle?
No, I went to a Capella rally in Boston, I rented a car, and then I hit the road. It's not that short of a drive.
Do you own a gun?
Yes, sir, I do. I own a handgun.
Holding up exhibit 5 for the witness and the members of the jury. Do you recognize what this is?
It's a sniper bullet, sir.
Can your handgun shoot a bullet like this?
No, sir, I don't even know if that would fit in my handgun. Certainly haven't tried.
How long has it been since you've touched a sniper rifle?
6 years and counting.
Nothing further.
Yeah, Your Honor, before cross-examination, I'll just be reading another portion of Exhibit 8, clear on the record what opposing counsel read from. I can't tell you what time I saw Crosby, except it must have been after I got there at 10 a.m.
You just asked that opposing counsel to finish reading that, or did you stop?
Okay. I mean, is there something else you would like to read?
Yes, or before the shooting, around 1:45.
Cross-examination, Your Honor, please. Good morning, Mr. Crosby.
Good morning, Nico.
Of course, you're aware that Tom Capello was shot and killed on July 4th, 2022, right?
I was there.
Mr. Crosby, you disguised Tom Capello.
I did. I thought he was bad for this country. That's why I was there, ma'am. I wanted to show my support for the protest.
Your words were, I thought he was bad for this country, and I want to talk about how strongly you felt about Tom Capello. Because you recognize Tom Capello's campaign schedule. If I showed it to you right now.
Yes, ma'am, I would.
Sir, flip to exhibit 10 in that binder.
Is it on a particular tab or?
I can hand it to you, Your Honor, if I can approach the witness.
Sure.
This is exhibit 10, right?
Okay, got it. 2 copies of it.
That's the campaign schedule of Tom Capello, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Not the first time you've seen it, sir.
No, ma'am.
You looked up Tom Capello's campaign schedule on the day it was released, right?
In April of 2022.
That's
Yes, ma'am.
the day it was released, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So on the day his campaign schedule was released, you made travel plans to follow Tom Capello around the country.
I made travel plans to go to his rallies in Boston, Cambridge, Providence, and Philadelphia, about the rest of it.
So you're telling us that the last rally you planned to attend was the Philadelphia rally?
Yes, ma'am. I'm not made of money. I don't have the money to go to all of these cities. I'm an Uber driver, so I picked the first 4. I took off work and went.
You picked the first 4 rallies to book flights, right?
Sure.
You booked hotels for those rallies.
I did.
Sir, you followed Tom Capello from city to city, right?
Yes, ma'am. I was protesting.
And at every city, sir, you stood in the crowd and you screamed how much you hated Tom Capello.
We expressed our disapproval of him running for president.
You expressed your disapproval with Tom Capello as a person.
As a presidential candidate.
Sir, you held up signs saying that you hated Tom Capello.
We held up signs saying that we disapproved of his messages, what he stood for. We didn't hate him as a person. We didn't like that he was running for president.
Okay, sir, so you held up signs saying you hated all of Tom Capello's politics at 4 separate cities, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, let's talk about how Tom Capello was killed, because you've been sitting in court throughout this trial, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And so, of course, you heard the agent testify.
I did.
You heard the agent say that the shooter in this case was standing on a rooftop, right?
I heard the agent say that the most likely place that the shot was taken from was the top of the Sonesta Hotel.
Okay, the most likely place the shot was taken from the roof of the Sonesta Hotel, correct?
Like I just said, yes.
So you also heard that you were seen walking to that roof.
Yes, I think the agent read something.
You heard that your DNA was found on that,
It's been on a cigarette that I smoked the day before.
and you heard the agent say that it would take a skilled shooter to commit this crime, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, on direct examination, you just said that you don't think you could take a shot like this. Am I getting that right?
Right now, 6 years out of the military, no, ma'am.
Let's talk about whether or not that's true. Mr. Crosby, do you know what this is?
It's a NATO sniper bullet, ma'am.
Sir, you know exactly what type of bullet this is, don't you?
Heard special agents say it on direct
It's
examination.
that you heard special agents say, no, you used this type of bullet before, right?
I have in the military.
You were trained to use this type of bullet.
I was.
You heard the agent say that this type of bullet is the type that killed Tom Capella.
Yes, ma'am.
You heard the agent say that this bullet was found inches away from your DNA, sir.
I think it was 4 feet
4 feet away from your DNA, sir.
from the cigarette. Yes, ma'am.
But Mr. Crosby, you're telling us that that's all a coincidence?
Yes, I smoked this cigarette on July 3rd. I licked it to the edge and I left.
Right, it's your testimony right now that that DNA with that cigarette with your DNA on it, it wasn't from the crimes, right?
I'm confused. Could you rephrase your question?
Sure, sir. You're telling us right now that you did not smoke that cigarette while you shot Tom Capella, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. I'm certainly saying that.
It's your testimony under oath right now that you didn't commit this crime, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Crosby, you've lied under oath before.
Not proud of it, but yes. The FBI had asked me if I was on that rooftop and I said no.
Let's talk about those lies in a bit more detail, because of course you were interrogated when you were arrested, right?
Yes, ma'am. The police asked me to come in for an interview. I did.
That's right, they asked you if you were ever at the Sonesta rooftop, correct?
They did.
You said no.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, that was a lie, right?
Yeah, I'm not proud of it, but it was.
You lied to the police in a federal crime investigation, correct?
At first I did. Scared Mr. Jacoby. I didn't want them to assume anything. That's why I told them what really happened.
Sir, I'm not asking why you lied, I'm asking whether you did, and you did, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's talk about the next lie, sir, because when you were in the military, well, you were accused of committing a crime, right?
What do you mean, ma'am?
Sir, you were accused of committing a crime while you were in the military, right?
Objection, Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 404, may I be heard? Your Honor, the witness is using past acts to show that the witness acted in conformity. Your Honor, the witness, Mr. Jacoby is referring to an occurrence in the military where there was a violent act that occurred. They're using that for propensity to show that because Mr. Crosby may have acted violently in the past, that he acted violently in the case.
Response, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor, my wording of this question was very intentional. I did not bring up the fact that this was an assault, as I agree, that's inadmissible propensity evidence. I may proffer what I'm getting at here. Yes, Your Honor, in general, this witness lied under oath while being accused of a crime. That goes to his character for untruthfulness pursuant to Rule 608. Now, as I'm just referring to a crime in general without getting into the assault, we don't fall under that issue that opposing counsel is mentioning. All we have here is attacking the witness's character for truthfulness. That's admissible.
Your Honor, in that case, we ask for a limiting instruction to ensure that the jury doesn't take it for propensity, but only going to 608.
Yeah, I agree. Keep your question carefully worded. If she doesn't, certainly bring it.
Yes. So you were accused of committing a crime in the military, right?
I was.
Some armed investigators sat you down and asked whether you did.
Yes, they did.
You said no.
I did.
You swore that you did not commit this crime, right?
I did.
You swore you were not present when that crime happened.
Yes, ma'am.
You looked people in the eye and you swore You were telling the truth, right?
I did, yes, ma'am, I don't know how many times I can say that.
Sir, I'll ask you one more time. You signed your name on a lie.
I guess,
Sir, you're not guessing. You know for a fact, you signed your name and it was all a lie.
I guess, ma'am, it was 8 years ago, it was a stupid mistake I made when I was in the military.
Yes or no, Mr. Crosby? You lied about committing a crime.
I did. Stupid mistake I made 8 years ago, I just joined the military.
Thank you, sir. Nothing further.
Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Now check how much time I have remaining.
Yes, you have 45 seconds left.
Opposing counsel just asked you about those protests you attended. In those protests, did you ever hold up signs saying you wanted to attack the senator?
No,
Did you ever hold up signs saying you wanted to shoot the senator?
no, of course not.
Mr. Jacoby just asked you about what you told the FBI. Why did you say that to the FBI, sir?
Fuck, I was scared. I didn't want them assuming that because I was on that rooftop, that I had to have committed this crime, and I was wrong. I was wrong about it.
Sir, did you purchase the bullet that opposing counsel showed you on cross-examination?
No, I haven't seen a NATO bullet in years.
Nothing further.
Cross.
No recall.
Witnesses excused, anything further from the defense?
Nothing further from the defense, Your Honor. We rest our case with you.
All right. Clothing arguments.
That's right. May I proceed?
Ma'am.
I lied under oath before. I lied in a federal crime investigation. I looked people in the eye. I swore I didn't commit that crime, and I signed off on a lie. The defendant in this case is a liar. I know it sounds blunt, members of the jury, but we just heard on cross-examination the truth. At every point throughout this investigation, this defendant tried to hide. The defendant tried to hide the rooftop. The defendant tried to hide where he was. The defendant tried to hide that he had the right skill set. The defendant tried to hide on the stand today, and he almost stayed hidden. But he got caught. The defendant was hidden. The victim was in plain sight. That's why we brought the defendant, Blake Crosby, to court today. And we brought a charge of first-degree murder against him. And so what that means, members of the jury, is that we had to prove that Blake Crosby intentionally killed Tom Capello beyond a reasonable doubt. I told you at the beginning of this trial, that's a high burden, but it's one that we took seriously and it's one that we met. Because the thing about reasonable doubt, members of the jury, is that it must be reasonable. And so if you walk out of this courtroom today and you believe that the only reasonable explanation for the crime is what we've shown you, then you must find the defendant guilty. To help you reach that decision, I want to go back to those three facts that we focused on throughout this trial: the reasons, the resume, and the rooftop. The members of the jury, I'll be honest that it's not very often in cases like these, the defendant literally threatens the victim in writing, but we have that here. Because Mr. Crosby just tried to say he didn't hold up signs that said he wanted to kill Tom Capello. No, he just posted that on the internet. Because we saw this tweet today where Blake Crosby wrote, "As long as he is alive, none of us are safe." But maybe you're not convinced by it. A lot of people make political posts on the internet, and not all of those people go out and kill someone. But we heard today that the defendant wasn't just content with being an anonymous internet persona. No, he wanted to threaten in person too. Because I showed the defendant Mr. Crosby's campaign schedule. I asked if he'd seen it before, and his answer was more than just a resounding yes. He said, I looked up this campaign schedule on the day it was released. On the day it was released, I made travel plans. On the day it was released, I booked flights. On the day it was released, I spent thousands of dollars following Tom Capello across the country from rally to rally, and he admitted to you. July 4th in Philadelphia, that was the last one. You know exactly why. So that brings us to that second fact, the defendant's resume. Because the Secret Service agent today, she explained how hard it is to commit a crime like this. The killer in this case, he had to know where Tom Capello would be at 1:45 p.m. She had to know how to access Tom Capello. He had to know how to use a gun to shoot Tom Capello. And members of the jury, I want to be clear, we're taking one shot, center of the forehead from 1,000 feet away. Just ask yourselves, who knows how to commit a crime like this? It isn't the civilians on the street of Philadelphia. It's the defendant. Because as many times as the defendant tries to say, I couldn't have done this, I don't know how to do this, we've heard that's not true. The defendant recognized the bullet that committed this crime because he spent 8 years holding those bullets in his hand. I showed the defendant the bullet in this case, and his eyes practically lit up. He said, I know this bullet. I've used this bullet. I've shot this bullet before. Take him in the word. So finally, members of the jury, we land on the third fact. That's the root cause. Because the defendant was a pretty skilled criminal, but he got sloppy. Because we heard that someone saw the defendant walking up to the rooftop, dressed in all black, carrying a backpack about an hour before the crime. Members of the jury, I want to go through that again. The defendant was seen dressed in a disguise, sneaking onto the crime scene under an hour before the man he despised suddenly drops dead. I mean, members of the jury, eyewitness sightings do not get better than this. The defendant tried to stay hidden, but he was caught in the act. The defense says no. The defense says he has an alibi because someone saw him at the rally, but what the defense didn't mention is they saw the exact rally within a 4-hour range. Before the crime is not an alibi, members of the jury. That's not an alibi at all. But even if you are inclined to agree with the defense, if you're thinking maybe Mr. Crosby's telling the truth on this stand today, I want you to remember what Mr. Crosby did the last time he was accused of a crime. Over and over again, he lied. He said it's a stupid mistake. I looked people in the eye, I signed my name, and every single word was a lie. Why on earth would this case be any different? The defendant was hidden. The victim was in plain sight. A victim, Tom Capello. That's the reason we're here. Because Tom Capello was a politician. It was controversial, yes. But whatever your political stance, I'm sure you've agreed how important it is. We can speak up for what we believe. That we can vote for the candidates who stand for what we stand. That we can express our opinions. That we're allowed to disagree. Tom Capello should have been able to speak. This defendant, he took away his voice. The reason this crime is so awful is because the defendant killed someone for what he believed. Find him guilty. Thank you.
We should retrieve evidence before closing arguments? Or- Would you proceed? May it please the court. Now. Members of the jury. 18 minutes. That's how long the prosecution's case in chief lasted. They accuse a warrior of committing the biggest assassination in the last 60 years, the trial of the century, members of the jury. And they have no video to support their argument, no pictures, no records to indicate he ever purchased a sniper rifle, nothing to indicate he purchased ammo, nothing to say that he ever owned a sniper rifle. You heard the last time he touched a sniper rifle was back in the military. The prosecution doesn't get to say, oh, he knew sniper rifles in the past. He worked with them in the past. He must have used it in this case. That's not how this works, members of the jury. They don't get to wrap up a case in 18 minutes and accuse a veteran, someone who risked his life for our country. They want to talk about what he believes, members of the jury. He told you today on the stand he believes in this country. He believes in fighting for our democracy, for our freedoms, for the freedom of speech, for the right to vote. That's what he believes. That's what he fought for 8 years, members of the jury. This man is a veteran. He's not a vigilante. See, the prosecution, they thought they could walk in today and then tell them that a war hero would murder an innocent person, but that's not something they can tell you. It's something they have to prove. They have to do it with facts. They have to do it with evidence. They have to meet the highest burden that we have in our legal system, members of the jury, beyond a reasonable doubt. The problem with the prosecution is that when Mr. Crosby walked through those doors, he was presumed innocent. When Mr. Crosby took this stand, presumed innocent. No matter how many questions the prosecutor asks him on cross-examination, he is presumed innocent, members of the jury, and he still is, unless they've met their burden. Let's talk about the presumptions, members of the jury, because the prosecution told you that they laid it out nice and neat on the floor here. A bullet here, a cigarette nearby. Let's talk about this cigarette, members of the jury. The cigarette, it's the only piece of forensic evidence they have in this case. They think they can tell you, look, it's close to a sniper bullet. He must have done it. In a courtroom, close isn't good enough. This is not a murder weapon, members of the jury. It's a cigarette. It's not a crime to smoke a cigarette. I was standing here right where I'm standing now, questioning the agent. Agent, can this tell you that he smoked it on the day of the crime? No. Do you know when he smoked it? No. Does this tell you he actually fired that sniper bullet? No, this has his fingerprints on it. Let's listen to their story. If this has his fingerprints on it, if this has its DNA on it, why doesn't the bullet? Why doesn't that sniper part that the agent talked about that they failed to show you today, why doesn't that have any DNA evidence on it? Why doesn't that have any fingerprints on it? Why this has fingerprints on it with the bullet not? That's not consistent. What it's consistent with, members of the jury, is exactly what Mr. Crosby told you today on the stand, that he smoked a cigarette on July 3rd. And then someone else fired that bullet on July 4th. Members of the jury, the prosecution has 3 unanswered questions that we focused on today, so let's break them down one by one, starting with where Blake Crosby was. Because the prosecution, they got up on closing argument and they said he had to have been on that roof. They said they had an eyewitness who saw him. The agent said that they saw him moments before the shooting, but is that true? Because I got up on cross-examination, I asked the agent, moments before? An hour before. They cannot just tie the gaps together without proof, members of the jury. They don't have an eyewitness who places him on that rooftop at the time of the shooting. Where was he? You heard it, and now. Blake Crosby doesn't know the person who saw him in that crowd. No connection. Independent witness, no reason to lie. And we have the affidavit of an eyewitness who says they are 100% certain that they saw him exactly where he said he was. The reason why he was there, to protest peacefully. The prosecution says that he's a killer. If he's a killer, why didn't he make the killing happen on the first protest? This is a man who peacefully protested time and time again. Why would that change, members of the jury? It's what he holds near to his heart. A veteran who upholds the rights of this country, including the right to peacefully protest. It's not a crime to peacefully protest. It's not a crime to hold up signs. If we prosecuted every single person who made it an angry tweet on social media, we'd have a case backlog lasting into next year. That's not proof. Let's talk about who actually could have fired that bullet. Question number 2. Members of the jury, you heard today the senator was controversial, receiving death threats. Protesters, angry people wanting him dead, and they were there that day. Not just 1 or 2 of them, hundreds of them. And did the prosecution investigate them? We asked the agent on the stand. And what did the agent have to say? I don't know if any of them had military history. I don't know if any of them had the skills to fire a weapon. Members of the jury, it's not Mr. Crosby's job to find out that information. It's the government's, and they did. So question number 3. What evidence do they actually have? All they've got is a cigarette he smoked. That's the only piece of evidence, forensic evidence they had. The bullet, no forensic evidence tying it back. 2 pieces of evidence. What don't they have? The murder weapon, phone records tying back to him, any indication he ever purchased a sniper rifle. He doesn't own one. They offer no evidence to prove otherwise. Any evidence to prove that he actually purchased the bullet. He doesn't own any bullets ever since he left the military. They offer no evidence to prove otherwise. He would not have been capable of committing this crime. He can't just bring a sniper rifle. He doesn't live in Philadelphia. They have no records he purchased one. You can't bring a sniper rifle through TSA. He told you he didn't. Members of the jury, they're asking you to make connections, to make presumptions, but what the law requires you to presume is the presumption of innocence. He's a veteran, members of the jury. But he's not a vigilante. So find him not guilty. Thank you. Wallace.
Yeah, John. 3 questions, 3 answers. Where was Mr. Crosby? He was on the rooftop. His DNA puts him there, an eyewitness puts him there. Their alibi was from 4 hours before. Who actually killed him? The defendant who followed him, the defendant who threatened him, the defendant who booked hotels to protest him. What evidence do they actually have? A motive, his hate. We have a means, the gun, the bullet that he explained he's familiar with, the opportunity. That's 8 years of experience committing crimes just like this one. Members of the jury, being a veteran doesn't make him guilty. Not protesting, it doesn't make him guilty. But being at the scene of the crime right before and shooting that rifle, that does. Find him guilty.
Thank you very much. I'll ask the judges to go out your ballots. And just indicate for me and our bailout when you have done so.